Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Short & Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas. And by Lafayette Comedy, bringing national comedy shows to Acadiana.
From Tula Tacos and Amigos in downtown Lafayette, we're out to lunch with Christian Mader, publisher and editor of The Current. It's business, Acadiana style.
Welcome to Out to Lunch. I'm Christian Mader. Swamps and the French language put up barriers to globalization in Acadiana for generations. At least that's the conventional narrative that we tell ourselves. But even within our own community, we often underestimate just how wide the cultural landscape in South Louisiana has always been. Barriers persist, but there are lots of creative, thoughtful people chiseling away at them and mining for a common heritage. It's not limited to art or culture anthropology. Lafayette has explored international touchstones for decades through big events like Festival International and more recently the Latin Music Festival. And my guest, Cristina Martinez, is in the business of expanding those horizons. She's been an event planner in Lafayette for 6 years, managing projects big and small for Party Central, and has hosted the Latin Music Festival herself. She's also a media personality, moonlighting as the host of After Party with Cristina Martinez, a Facebook Live show about sex, sexuality, and sexual health. During the pandemic, Cristina stepped up as a daily reporter, translating press conferences and COVID information for Acadiana's rapidly growing Hispanic community. She was born in Puerto Rico and has lived in Lafayette for 12 years. Cristina Martinez, welcome to Out to Lunch.
Oh my God! Hi, you make me sound so interesting. That was great. I mean, I need that for whenever I die and put it on my what do you call that? Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome, Cristina. I have news for you. You are interesting.
Thank you. I guess. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So, what does it mean to be from somewhere? Anyway, home is an idea that my next guest, Olivia Perillo, has explored in documentaries and in her photography. Since childhood, she's been enamored of the connection between Acadiana's swamps and the deserts of West Texas, where she spent time on trips to visit her mother's family. Olivia and her creative partner have produced two documentaries over the last couple of years: Migration, which profiled women leaving their birthplaces in search of new homes, and Intention, which profiled the diversity of Louisiana cultural traditions among women. Olivia's work on Intention was funded by a Create Louisiana grant, and her films have been screened internationally. She also works as an archivist for artist Linda Fries and a photographer for Country Roads magazine. Olivia Perillo, welcome to Out to Lunch.
Thanks for having me.
So, Cristina, it's a bold thing to launch a show like After Party, oddly, even in 2021, I think. But I'm curious how you found an audience for that in Lafayette, specifically because it's like a Spanish language show.
Yes. Well, I don't know. I guess I've been living in Louisiana for 12 years, and I know a lot of people in the Hispanic community, Mexican, Honduran, Puerto Rican. Here, it's a huge diversity, and I have a lot of friends that I guess they weren't educated in that aspect. It's something that they do not talk about. So they don't understand how birth control works. They don't understand what a menstrual cup is. They also talk about sex in a way that you shouldn't talk about that in 2021. It's just, I mean, you have sex to reproduce, but you don't have sex for fun. Mm-hmm. They don't enjoy sex. So I was just like, you know what, let's do this. And I actually bring out sex toys, tampons, condoms, and I talk to specialists about sex and talk about being gay, mm-hmm. lesbian, and now all the other terms that are out there. So, I've had a transsexual, transvestite on my show. Mm-hmm. So it's just to educate them.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I guess what I'm curious about is like, you know, when you're thinking about who you would actually get to tune in, right? And it's like, I'm thinking of the layers of complexity, like first finding an audience that's, you know, speaking to folks primarily in Spanish. When you talk about, like, people in maybe that culture aren't that open about talking about these things. I don't know that people are that open about talking about these things just in Lafayette, right? So I'm just like thinking like that's two layers, right, that you've got to break through. And so when you do that first show, I mean, did you find that people flocked to it? Was it easy to get them to tune in, or was it something that you really had to find an audience for?
The first show was really, really out there. And it was, that's the first show that I actually literally brought a dildo out. it was a shock.
Yeah.
I've had the Hispanic church. They are against my show, and they have tried to shut it down. They report the show.
Yeah.
They do all these things. So yes, at first it was hard. A lot of people are very open, and they thank me for the show. But I have a lot of religious people that are just against it, and that's okay. I mean, I knew it was going to happen. I just wish that people that it would be in English too.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's been fun.
Don't rule that out just yet. I mean, Olivia, looking at your list of projects, I mean, you're really hustling, not uncommon for somebody in your line of work. But you're also tackling some pretty heavy subjects, I think, in your documentary work. And so a lot of times that stuff is funded by grants. Generally, artists have to go after philanthropy, but that takes that's like a full-time job all by itself. So how do you actually balance that? I mean, trying to figure out the time to do the work and get it paid for.
I'm definitely still figuring that out. It's definitely a challenge, but it's a labor of love too, because it's work that I want to be doing regardless of being paid for it, and just getting to that payment part is, that much more, awesome.
Yeah, sure.
That wasn't eloquent, but...
Well, I mean, I guess, look, I'm not necessarily trying to go after the starving artist question.
Right.
It's like, but I do wonder sometimes, like, when you go through school and maybe you get sort of trained in, art, this medium or that medium, right? Do they even take the time to explain to you, like, look, I mean, there is a process, right, for developing a business out of this. There is a process for applying for grants, for knowing about things like the Great Louisiana Grant. I mean, how do you even land in that? Do they teach you that stuff?
Well, honestly, I only have 2 years of college education, and I've never taken a film or photography class.
Wow.
So it's all self-taught, and by knowing people in the community, I've had a lot of mentors throughout the last few years that have helped me out with, or just by observing them really and working with them, like on film sets, like Allison Bull and Peter DeHart. Just taking notes of what other people are doing and figuring out how that works on my own schedule and my own ways of process.
Yeah. I was pretty intrigued by the idea that, like, you felt like, you would go back to visit your mom's family, and you felt like there's sort of a connection between the cultures out there and South Louisiana, which is like very basic. The big difference seems to be like, that's very dry. This place is very wet. I mean, what is the actual connection there that you see?
Well, I think culturally we're really similar as far as like the way we celebrate and also our work ethic. I think as far as Mexican culture or, Tejano culture with Cajun and Creole people, they all come from struggle. And so I think that they have a work hard, play hard mentality. And I find that in celebration a lot, which is awesome. A celebration of, birthdays or anniversaries, great, happy things, but also in death as well, which is heavy. But I've been exploring that a lot, and just the honoring of the dead ancestors and friends, it seems to really hit a lot deeper than it does in the rest of the country in the way that it's celebrated.
Yeah.
With jazz funerals in New Orleans, you know, and, these big parties that I grew up being a part of in West Texas.
Yeah. So, I mean, Cristina, you've landed, at least that I know of, in 3 different, cultures you've described. I mean, growing up in Puerto Rico, being raised in Venezuela, then you in Louisiana. I mean, have you found similar through lines from place to place that you've landed?
Yes, I think you're completely right. We do celebrate the same way, but Mexican, Puerto Ricans, Honduran, Venezuelan, it's very similar to the Cajun culture. If you go up north, they tend to be a little bit, not as, warm and fuzzy, like, let's just put it that way. So yes, I completely agree with what you're saying.
I mean, how have you observed that from your work as an event planner? I mean, like, when you're, it sounds like something that you're really passionate about, the way that you develop like this kind of stuff. I mean, is there really a connection and sort of the common things that people would expect at a big corporate event, here versus somewhere else? I mean,
Party-wise is completely different. I'm fortunate enough that I work for an amazing company that they let me be very creative. Now, if we do, let's say an example, a quinceañera and a Cajun wedding, there are similarities, but at the same time, they are different. So yes, I mean, there are so many things that I can say, but
Let's unpack all of them.
I mean,
I've definitely experienced that.
Quinceañera.
My cousin had a quinceañera a couple years ago and in Arizona, and I went and photographed. And
tell me it's not the most ridiculous thing you've ever
it
seen.
was so extravagant. It was amazing.
Yes.
It was wonderful.
Yes. I mean, the dresses.
Oh, everybody looked amazing, and it's like they have like kind of like a bridal party, you know, like a wedding party.
Yeah.
So there's 15 girls, 15 boys, and and they have this like synchronized dance that's traditional.
It's a huge production. Did she go to the mall? Because they apparently, I just learned this the other day, before the quinceañera, but they do this a lot in Texas and Mexico, but not here. They go to the mall and they just walk.
Oh, like to show off?
Yes.
Oh,
but
that's
I mean,
cute.
it's like a huge, it's like the big gypsy wedding. It's a huge dress.
Oh my
Yes.
God.
Yes.
So, I mean, is there a look? I understand that, like, sort of there are more people in the Hispanic community growing up here in Lafayette. I mean, do you have to have a specialty events business to cater to something like she described it as extravagant? And I'm thinking, okay, I've been to some extravagant weddings, but I mean, sounds like it's quite different, maybe in nature. I mean,
honestly, that it's a little bit complicated and it's mainly the Mexican community,
Sure.
not as much as the other ones, to have that kind of production here in Louisiana. Their parties, Louisiana, usually, like, let's say if they hire you to do a wedding at a venue, they're approximately 4 hours. Mexicans, it would be 10, 12 hours. I mean, and the amount of alcohol, you would know.
Yeah.
You would know.
I
The
do.
food, it's ridiculous. So
It's endless.
there are certain places that they're allowed to do those parties here, but they tend to be really wild. A Cajun wedding or event that gets that wild is usually out at their property, because you just can't do that at a venue. But it gets crazy.
yeah. I mean, so Olivia, in your work, it sounds like you've been able to sort of explore, different kind of connection points about different cultures within Louisiana, different cultures in your own life. I mean, does this work tend to surprise you a good bit? I mean, like you just described, like going to visit a cousin in Arizona and you're seeing how extravagant all this is, right? I mean, like, is that what really you gravitate toward, or is it this sort of heavier aspect that you were describing earlier?
I would definitely say both, because I don't think you could have one without the other. I like the balance of the happiness and the darkness.
Yeah.
You know, I think that duality is really important and essential whenever looking at ancestral healing work and just learning more about yourself and your culture. And since I was born here and grew up here in South Louisiana, and I traveled my whole life, I was always in between the two. And every time I would go and come back, it was always this like perspective shift that was kind of trippy, because it was, living in these two different ways of life, visiting my family and being here with, different social circles. But at the same time, it's refreshing to see, because it's always interesting, and I'm constantly, as I get older, I'm constantly seeing similarities between the two and differentiating them. But that's something that I strive to do in my photography work, is like capture the both, but relate and show how they are similar yet different in these different ecosystems.
What do you mean when you're talking about ancestral healing work,
So
healing culture?
yeah, so
So interesting. I'm like, what?
I'm pretty new with it, but so ancestral healing work is basically understanding who your ancestors were and where you come from, and learning what struggles they went through, because a lot of their traumas are passed down through our DNAs. So, for example, if we have a problem with alcoholism, we are likely to have alcoholism in our family, with our grandparents or our great-grandparents, or even before then. Mm-hmm. And what caused them to be alcoholics in the first place? Was it migration or, colonization, et cetera, et cetera. There's endless lists of things why people drink. Mm-hmm. And it's been a fascinating journey to, I started kind of like on Ancestry.com after archiving my family's old photographs, because, they were just in boxes, and I wanted, digital preservations of them. So I started scanning them and then incorporating them into my collage work with my photography of the land that held them out west. So it's kind of this cool juxtaposition of past and present, but also learning who my people were that came before me, and trying to understand them the most, so that I don't pass down generational traumas to my future children if I have them.
That's fascinating. I mean, especially like trying to think about just doing that much digging in your own heritage and like actually like climbing into, the skeletons in the closet. It sounds like you spend a lot of time just actually like trying to introduce yourself to skeletons.
Definitely, it's dark work, but it's really it's healing, which I find so fascinating with it, and that's something that I hope that other people can see within my work, to look at themselves and see, where they come from, and to learn, the most about themselves.
Have you found anything like shocking that it's like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened, or any part of history of your family that?
Yes and no, I think, because I think that if we're really like intuitively in our bodies, I think that we can like feel these certain things. So some things aren't surprising, but as I've gotten older, just like learning things about my family and, realizing, okay, this makes sense why people's behavior. I'm really into psychology, so like witnessing how people behave, in certain situations and environments is fascinating to me.
You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Christian Mader. I'm talking to documentarian Olivia Perillo and event planner Cristina Martinez. Cristina, on your show, right? It sounds like the format, right, is you talking to people that you're probably already friends with, right?
Yes.
Mostly, but
yes.
But you're still asking people to open up in a way that she's exploring her culture.
I would love to have you on my show.
It's just sort of like thinking about okay, but it's still confronting something that people don't like to talk about in the open, whether that's sex or relationships.
Yes.
How do you actually get people to open up?
Well, it's so interesting because last month I had a lady, a witch, maybe you would say. She's actually from Mexico, and I contacted her. She specializes in doing brujeria. So, because people talk about that, but nobody knows what it is, but they just talk about it.
I don't know what that is. What
brujeria is basically voodoo, dark magic, and all that.
Yeah.
So, I was asking her what kind of jobs she does for people, and she was telling me about breaking people up and the process of it. So it's very interesting, and in the Hispanic community this is a thing. They actually believe in this. Like, you pass an egg all over your body, and then you leave it like 24 hours. I might be saying it wrong. And then you crack it open, and then it shows if somebody did brujeria on you or on your kid. Like,
okay.
if your baby is very whiny, they tell you to just pass an egg. So it's one of those things. And I had this woman. So it's not just relationship. I like to talk about things that people don't like to talk about. So that's one of the things. And it's and this month, because it's Halloween, I want to talk about Dia de los Muertos and all these interesting things that people just know about but don't really know about it. So
I guess it's interesting to me. It's like you're going after things that people don't want to talk about, but you have a talk show.
Yes.
So how do you actually make that work? It almost feels like at some level somebody would just be like, hey, leave me alone. I want to keep that. I want to keep my skeletons in the closet. They were comfortable there.
But I do it in a way that, like this lady, you wouldn't. She wasn't showing her face. I ask people. I'm pretty out there. I'm like, I want to talk about this, and I ask them, do you feel comfortable? Some of them say yes. Some of them say no, and that is okay. So I go to somebody else. So, but I can talk about good things, bad things, just whatever, usually what they don't want to talk about. And don't get me wrong, I am extremely criticized. Like small-minded people, mainly Hispanic people. I talk about what a Prince Albert is. I talk about all these sexual things that people just do not want to talk about. And I get labeled as if I am a very extremely open-minded person, which I am, but they think that I practice everything that I talk about, which is okay. I don't care. Yeah. My partners on the show are Eddie Montt. He's a hairstylist. He's married. He's gay. And then I have Daisy Jimenez. She's a photographer, and she's openly bisexual. So, but I'm the one that gets criticized, and I'm okay with that. I don't care, because ultimately, if one or two teenagers learned about being gay and coming out and that it's not wrong, or a housewife that learns about sex, it's great. There was one show that I was like, you know what, if you don't have the money to pay for any sort of sex toy, use these household items. And mind you, I brought these. I mean, apparently there is a hand job and blow job that you give with a grapefruit. Google it. Just Google it.
Yeah.
So I was just household items that you can use as sexual toys. Spatula. Hey, to each his own.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's like you're very openly confronting people with this. I mean, and obviously you live in a different way, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Sure.
in a different way, right? Art can be, especially the kind of work that you're talking about, right? I mean, if you're talking about colonization, if you're talking about systemic racism, right? Like these are things that people don't like to be confronted with,
Right.
And it can be challenging even to find people to support that work. I mean, so how do you go into that in a way that gives you? I mean, look, I know the artist's mindset would be to say, look, it's important that I do it, but I mean, does that enter your mind, the fact that you're having to sort of take a step to? I mean, we'll go back to the skeletons of the closet thing. Like you're opening the closet door here and saying, like, deal with this.
Sure. It's a little rebellious, but I think it's important for everybody to acknowledge confronting these issues really can push our culture forward,
Yeah.
which I'm really passionate about portraying. And as Cristina was saying, as far as like the faith healing goes, so as far as with intention,
Yep.
having traiteurs in the film was essential to us because we know that these healers exist in every culture, but some cultures don't acknowledge it, you know.
I have to ask you something.
Yeah,
Can I
go
ask
ahead.
her something?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
absolutely.
Go ahead.
And this is something that I ask myself every day.
Yeah.
Because look, I'm a single mother, and for me, there's a very thin line. I work at Party Central, and I know that doing such a like an out there show could hurt my career. It hasn't yet, fortunately. Again, I work for an amazing company. But what is your purpose? It's like,
Right.
like, why do you do it?
Right.
So, yes.
Well, yeah, like you said, I think progressing our culture is really important because we do have a lot of these traditional ideals and possibly, you know, just a lot of, without knowing the full extent of what it is, you know, people are afraid of, you know, going to these skeletons in the closet and don't want to confront them. But I think once they do, or once they understand that it's not, you know, dark magic, or even if it is, that it's not necessarily bad, you know, that we can progress our culture as, you know, just for the future. It's part of our evolution.
Yeah, you know, I feel like I've asked this question on the show a bunch of times because people bring up traiteurs, for instance. I mean, is that? Are you familiar with the term traiteur, Cristina? Is it okay? So well, actually, maybe Olivia would be better to explain it. She's the one actually researched.
Sure. In Cajun and Creole cultures, traiteurs are faith healers, traditionally based in the Catholic faith. But they would say prayers over you, sometimes, you know, just once, or sometimes for like a period of 5 days or a week or something, and for whatever you're struggling with.
and
whether
that's
it's,
here. They have those
Yes.
here. Okay.
Yes. And so with intention, we have two traitors in the film, Becca Begnaud and Miss Willa Mae Dugas, and it was interesting to hear both of their perspectives of where they came from and whenever they realized. So the gift is traditionally passed down from someone of the opposite sex that's older than you traditionally, but that's not how everybody receives these specific kinds of prayer.
Okay.
And that goes into the French language too, because part of the prayer that they say it's in French, but it doesn't really mean anything in French.
Okay.
So there's that concept of, well, if these words don't mean anything in a certain language, does that mean they're ineffective? Or, well, I think not, because, you know, it's the intention behind it of what they're trying to.
Are they healers?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yes.
So I guess my question is you described the woman the witch. You
Brujeria.
described
Yes.
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 So I mean, was that a kind of faith healer? I mean,
No, this woman believes in what is called La Santa Muerte.
Okay.
Which is a whole, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I don't know a lot of La Santa Muerte.
Yeah.
They are not Catholics. They're not Christians. They believe in, it's like, I'm going to find an image.
Okay.
Because it is kind of creepy.
Is it
really
just like a pre-colonized method of healing? Like it goes back to indigenous
No.
people? No.
Oh, okay.
That
yeah.
would be Santeria.
That
They
looks
believe,
like the
Okay.
Grim
they
Reaper.
believe,
Okay,
yes,
there's a picture
basically.
for the radio listeners out there. It's a
Yes.
picture of a Grim Reaper.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you have to offer something. You ask for what you want, and then you have to give them something. I mean, if let's say I want to win the lotto, I don't know, an example. But if I win, I'm going to give you a sack of oranges. Is just an example. And these people have an altar of everything that they offer. So let's say now if you go deep into it, you offer a dead animal, or it goes, it's really dark. And she was explaining that to us, that she mainly is to get your partner back, or to break somebody up. And she was telling us the things that she has to do, and she usually goes to a cemetery, and it's what it's called a panteon. And because they do that, I don't know if they do that here. In Mexico, it's very common that they have a panteon. It's like they bury somebody, and then you go in there, and I mean, some of these people have like living rooms and stuff in there, and then you just go and put the one of those candles and pictures, and you offer things to them, La Santa Muerte.
Wow.
So it's
It's what's interesting to me about this, right, is that these are all things I think that we all confront, period, right? So you're talking about, people's relationship with death or with sex, right? Like these are actually like culturally universal because they're universal to the human experience. So it makes sense, of course, that you would find these things expressed everywhere. And it's, we might think that it's kind of shaped a little bit differently and a little foreign to us, but the reality is that we're all just sort of talking about the same thing. And so it's interesting to talk to two people, of course, who've kind of made recent careers of themselves of like trying to get people to talk about these things that they often try to keep in the closet. So thank you guys for sharing that with me on Out to Lunch. Cristina and Olivia, thank you so much for joining me today on Out to Lunch Acadiana.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
My guests on Out to Lunch Acadiana have been event planner Cristina Martinez and documentarian Olivia Perillo. We edited this show to fit in the time slot here on KRVS, and you can hear our unedited conversation and find out more about Cristina and Olivia and what they do by listening to the Out to Lunch Acadiana podcast, which you can find anywhere you get podcasts and on our website, it's Acadiana.com. If you want to know what we look like, you can find photos from this show on itsacadiana.com and on our social media. These photos were taken by Astor Morgan, and you can find more of his work at astormorgan.com. Out to Lunch Acadiana is a production of INO Broadcasting for itsacadiana.com and KRVS 88.7 FM. The producer of our show is Grant Morris. Our technical producer is Eric Merle. Today's show was engineered by Kieran McIntosh, and our associate producers are Molly Richard and Jan Risher. Our researcher is Claire Como, and I'm Christian Mader. I'm editor of The Current, Lafayette's nonprofit source for local news. For more local news and commentary, head over to thecurrentla.com. Sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you here again next time for more business and conversation on Out to Lunch Acadiana. Bye-bye.
Out to Lunch Acadiana is recorded live over lunch at Tula Tacos and Amigos. Tula Tacos and Amigos offers street-style tacos, margaritas, and an open-air courtyard on Jefferson Street in the heart of downtown Lafayette. Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Shorten Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas. And by Lafayette Comedy, bringing national comedy shows to Acadiana. Mitchell Foreman wrote and performs all the music on Out to Lunch. You can hear Mitchell's music anywhere great jazz is sold or streamed, and at mitchellforeman.com.